Mabuhay and welcome to Philippines. Today we will tackle the important backgrounds of the Philippines. So listen carefully because we will answer some questions after this discussion. Let's go!
Our beautiful Philippines is a home to world-renowned natural wonders like an underground river and rice terraces, incredible diving spurts rich in biodiversity, colorful public transportation, unique cuisine, vibrant festivals that showcase its colorful culture, and friendly locals regarded as some of the happiest in the world. Our Philippines is a member of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN. And you know what? Our country is also considered the text capital of the world. Due to the large volume of text messages sent throughout the country, the Philippines has earned its nickname as the text capital of the world. Now let's move on to the country profile of the Philippines. Official name is Republika ng Pilipinas, short form Pilipinas, International long form Republic of the Philippines, International short form Philippines, and ISO country code is PH or capital letters PHS. Capital city is Manila. Manila is the capital and chief city of the Philippines. The city is the center of the country's economic, political, social, and cultural activity. Manila's 2021 population is now estimated at 14,158,573. The country is divided into three geographical divisions: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon is the largest island and where the capital is located. The second largest island is Mindanao. Philippine population. The current population in the Philippines is 111,046,913 people as of July 2021. The annual population growth rate has decreased significantly since 1960, where it was 3.3%, to now where it is about 1.3%. The fertility rate in the Philippines has also decreased significantly over the years. In 1969, the fertility rate was 6.4 children per woman. Today, the fertility rate is 2.1 children per woman. Part of the reason for this is the increased use of contraceptives and modern family planning methods. With about 2 million people added to the population every year, the population is expected to double in about 40 years. Next, nationality is Filipino or Filipinos. Government. The government system is a republic. The chief of state and head of government is the president. June 12, 1898, Philippine independence declared. Constitution. 2nd day of February 1987. Effective 11th day of February 1987. Philippine religions. Religion in the Philippines is heavily influenced by its history as a part of the Spanish Empire. As well as naming the country after its king, Philip II, Spain also exported its religion, and today, around 80% of the country's citizens are Roman Catholic Christians. Of the remaining people, 11% are from other Christian denominations, and around 5.6% are Muslim, mainly based in the southwest area of the country. Philippine languages. Philippine languages are Filipino and English. Filipino is based on Tagalog and our national language. English is widely used and is the medium of instruction in higher education. Geography. Philippines is a sovereign archipelago country in Southeast Asia situated in the Western Pacific Ocean. The geography is mountainous with narrow coastal lowlands. Philippine natural resources are timber, limited offshore petroleum, extensive mineral deposits of copper, gold, silver, nickel, lead, and chromium. Philippine agriculture products are rice, coconut, corn, sugarcane, bananas, pineapples, mangoes, pork, eggs, beef, and fish. And actually, Philippines is one of the world's largest producers of coconuts. Industries. Electronics assembly, textiles, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, wood products, food processing, petroleum refining, and fishing. And our currency is Philippine peso. Philippine peso has the currency abbreviation PHP. Now let's proceed to the brief history of the Philippines. Beginnings of the archipelago. Some 50 million years ago, the archipelago was formed by volcanic eruptions. About 30,000 years ago, the earliest inhabitants had arrived from the Asian mainland, perhaps over land bridges built during the Ice Ages. By the 10th century AD, coastal villagers welcomed Chinese commerce and settlers, followed by Muslim traders from Borneo. The early inhabitants of the Philippines were Mongoloid descent, which are predominant today. The gradual spread of Islam from Borneo into the central and northern island was interrupted by the arrival of the Spanish Christians. Next is discovery of the Philippines by the West and Revolution. The Philippines were claimed in the name of Spain in 1521 by Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer sailing for Spain, who named the islands after its King Philip II of Spain. They were then called Las Filipinas. By the 1830s, Spanish culture and thought had penetrated into Filipino culture to the extent that the Filipino people began thinking about liberation from Spain. The government of Spain developed Filipino agriculture to the point that it was self-sufficient. After some attempts of independence and an equal number of atrocities on the part of Spain, Filipino nationalists began to speak out. One of the most famous of that time was Jose Rizal. Rizal wrote two important novels that portrayed the abuses of Spanish rule. Although the books were banned, they were smuggled into the Philippines and widely read. On the night of his execution, on December 30, 1896, Rizal proclaimed the Philippines the Pearl of the Oriental Seas. His death is annually commemorated on December 30. Rizal's execution gave impetus to the revolution. Although the Filipino rebels led by Emilio Aguinaldo did not win complete independence, the Spanish were not able to end the rebellion. In December of 1897, negotiations with Spain resulted in the Pact of Biak na Bato. All of the rebels were granted amnesty, and the leaders of the revolution returned in voluntary exile to Hong Kong. While in Hong Kong, Aguinaldo and his compatriots designed what is today the Philippine national flag. Next, the American era and independence. At the same time that the Philippines were fighting for independence, Cuba, also a colony of Spain, was trying to liberate itself from Spanish rule. Cuba, however, had the backing of the United States. When the American battleship USS Maine sank in the Havana harbor, war between the United States and Spain became imminent. On April 25, 1898, the United States declared war on Spain, and the commander of the U.S. Asiatic Squadron, Commodore George Dewey, was sent to engage the Spanish Navy in the Philippines. The Spanish-American War officially ended with the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898. However, the American government was only interested in Cuba's independence, not that of the Philippines. By the treaty, Cuba gained its independence. The Treaty of Paris and subsequent actions by the United States were not well received by the Filipinos, who were not even consulted. The Philippine War of Independence began on February 4, 1899 and continued for 2 years. The United States needed 126,000 soldiers to subdue the Philippines. The war took the lives of 4,234 Americans and 16,000 Filipinos. The Commonwealth of the Philippines was established by the United States government in 1935 with a view to granting Filipino independence within 10 years. However, on December 8, 1941, 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military invaded the Philippines. United States forces under the command of General Douglas MacArthur withdrew to Java on December 12, 1941. MacArthur promised, "I shall return." General MacArthur kept his promise, ay sana all. and returned with a massive amphibious phase force on the island of Leyte in October of 1944. Over the next 4 months, U.S. forces, with the help of Filipino guerrillas, routed the Japanese army. After the war, the United States restored the pre-war Commonwealth government. By 1946, the Philippines had transformed from a commonwealth to an independent republic.
Alright, let's now move on to the geographic challenges. First one is climate. There are three recognized seasons here in the Philippines. The first one is tag-init or tag-araw. This is the hot season or summer season from March to May. The second one is the tag-ulan, the rainy season from June to November. The third one is the taglamig or the cold season from December to February. The humid southwest monsoon is from May to October. That is known as the habagat. The cool and dry winds of the northeast monsoon is from November to April. That is called amihan. These seasons can seriously get mixed up by the El Nino or the La Nina effects. El Nino brings dry weather and even droughts, while La Nina stands for rainy weather or floods. Sociocultural, the Philippines way of life. One of the most notable characteristics of Filipino society is its strong family and community relationships. These are strengthened by the traditional Filipino concept of utang na loob or in Bisaya, utang na kabubuton. Utang na loob is an act of voluntary assistance that creates an obligation that the receiver must attempt to repay through reciprocal assistance. This often creates a long-term relationship of giving and receiving between the Filipinos. In Philippine villages, houses are traditionally constructed of bamboo and nipa palm, touching and raised above the ground and poles, while more services and modern facilities are available in towns and cities. The influence of Western culture is more evident in urban areas. Farming, fishing, and forestry are the primary occupations in rural areas. Many of the rural poor are employed as tenant farmers and landless agricultural workers. Most urban residents are employed in the service sector or in manufacturing industry. There is a growing middle class of government employees, teachers, and small business owners. Social issues. Significant economic divisions exist in the Philippines. About 37% of the population live below the poverty line in 1997. The wealthiest 10% of families earn more than twice as much as the poorest 40%. The wealthy upper class, which includes landowners and business executives, enjoys a high standard of living. Some wealthy people live in large homes in guarded subdivisions. Meanwhile, many rural families cannot afford to provide basic essentials such as clothing and medicine for their children. Income in urban areas is generally higher than in rural areas, drawing a constant flow of migrants to the cities. Thus, some migrants live in squatters, dwelling in crowded slum areas in makeshift housing that lacks running water, sewerage system, and electricity. They tend to work as vendors, street hawkers, and unskilled laborers. Technological advancement. Philippines is not the world's least technologically advanced country. According to the Department of Science and Technology, it ranks 83rd out of 138 countries in terms of technological readiness. Compared to Japan, Singapore, and other Asian nations, we still have a long way to go. In addition, according to a recent survey, the Philippines belong to the top 20 countries in the world with the highest number of internet users. The Philippines is also the fastest growing smartphone nation in Southeast Asia. Population. According to the latest United Nations data, the July 1, 2021 current population of Philippines is estimated as 111,456,000. 46,913. The annual population growth rate has decreased significantly since 1960, where it was 3.3% to now, where it is about 1.3%. The fertility rate in the Philippines has also decreased significantly over the years. In 1969, the fertility rate was 6.4 children per woman. Today, the fertility rate is 2.1 children per woman. Part of the reason for this is the increased use of contraceptives and modern family planning methods. With about 2 million people added to the population every year, the population is expected to double in about 40 years. Pollution. According to the DNR in 2016, 80% of the country's air pollution came from motor vehicles, while 20% came from stationary sources, such as factories and open burning. But UPIESM professors Cayetano and Dr. Jerry Bagtasa both pointed out that there are other factors causing and affecting pollution. One is water, and the other is open burning. Major economic problems of the country. The major economic problem is the lack of knowledge of political leaders and the corruption that has plagued the country remarkably started by the world-breaking looting of the Marcos regime. Low economic mobility, poverty and income inequality, poor health care and nutrition, and environmental degradation are some of the key challenges the Philippines is facing in its development trajectory. The Philippines also suffers major human-caused environmental degradation aggravated by high annual population growth rate, including loss and agricultural lands, deforestation, soil erosion, air and water pollution, improper disposal of solid and toxic waste, loss of coral reefs, mismanagement and abuse of coastal resources, and overfishing. The lack of domestic manufacturing base, the lack of sufficient employment at a reasonable wage to sustain a fast-growing population, the overdependence on remittances that create a dependency mindset, and the lack of infrastructure to support economic growth. Problems involving trade. In most years in the past, not only that our total trade is one of the smallest in Asia, as a fraction of the gross domestic product, we also had always been importing more than exporting in the past. This could be one reason why our gross domestic product was one of the slowest to grow in the last 50 years of the previous century, which put us behind our neighbors in terms of material welfare by the time we entered the new millennium. Led by consumption, we grew a little faster at around 4.8% annually in the first decade of the new century, and faster still at 6.2% annually in the next 6 years through more investments, which growth has even accelerated in the last 2 years through more government expenditures. Problems involving exports and imports. The Philippines sales of its products abroad and the value of goods it imported from January to June fell by nearly 4 to $67.5 billion amid the COVID-19 induced global recession. The latest preliminary Philippine Statistics Authority data released showed that end of June merchandise exports dropped by 17.8% to $28.4 billion from $34.6 billion a year ago. Merchandise exports declined by 13.3% as outward shipments of mineral products, manufactured products, and forest products registered notable improvements. Imports, meanwhile, recovered gradually by registering a 24.5% decrease as inward shipments of unprocessed raw materials showed a positive rebound with the reopening of the economy. With restricted mobility and economic activity due to the pandemic, gross domestic product growth is negatively affected. Our major trading partners' GDP has declined in the second quarter of the year, resulting in a reduced appetite for imported goods, and this has led to the lower demand for the Philippine exports.
country. Territorial conflicts include the nature of the Philippines dispute in the South China Sea. China has ample historic and legal basis of its sovereignty over the Nansha Island and their adjacent waters. Second, the consensus between the China and the Philippines of the South China Sea issues. As early as 1980s, the Chinese side proposed shelving disputes and seeking joint development to the Philippine side, which reflect China's sincerity and good faith and its adherence to the international law and practices. The third, the issue of the Renai Reef, Second Thomas Shoal. In 1999, a Philippine Navy vessel illegal grounded of the Renai Reef of China's Nasha Island under the pretext of stranding. And next, the worst threat to the Philippine maritime security. The biggest problem starts with the Philippine government itself. So, on September 6, 2011, the President Benigno Aquino III signed Executive Order Number 57 establishing a new government organization that would address the country's urgent need for a coherent whole of the government and approaches the maritime enforcement or the MLE and governance. In May 10, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, officially used and introduced the concepts of the Automatic Identification System or the AIS, Vessels Monitoring, Vessels Traffic Service, Maritime Domain Awareness or MDA. The treatment of the maritime security is transformed with the MDA as its new approach state. Despite of the significant decrease of recorded maritime piracy, kidnapping, and armed robbery incidents within the Philippine water in the last 4 years. So, maritime terrorism, maritime disputes, transaction crimes, illegal fishing, and other maritime security threats continue to exist at that time. So, in October 2008, our President Rodrigo Duterte signed Executive Order Number 64 to facilitate the implementation of the revival of barter in Mindanao. This is a view of the unappreciated socio-economic benefits of the BIM or BIMEAGA, ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, and ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. Unfortunately, the implementation proved to be harder and exempted because of the lack of efficient of whole government support, such as the provision necessary administration and assistance to be delayed. So there are many happenings during that time. Involvement in ASEAN. In the year 1967, Philippines joined the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or the ASEAN. The country involves in maintaining and promoting peace, security, and stability in association, as well as the peaceful resolution disputes, including full of respect for legal and democratic progression. So ASEAN, it includes the unity and the peace of the country to country. So the country's benefits from joining the ASEAN are the following. Filipinos can study abroad. There are a lot of Filipinos who can study abroad and continue their study there because they have a lot of opportunity and a lot of knowledge that need to be able to learn. Second is improved job opportunities and general well-being. A lot of Filipinos are working abroad because they're in abroad. There are a lot of opportunities that gave us all our needs and wants. Sorry. Lower cost of living. So, less hassle in traveling. Yes. Improving trading, exporting, and importing of products. This is a very important, and this business is very good when you join the ASEAN because no hassle. And also, it helps our country to maintain peace and security. So, when you join the ASEAN, or the country join, or the Philippines join the ASEAN, it helps the other country helps each other. They don't need to stay, or you don't need to live with it. Just go with it, and that's all. Thank you.